The May 20th meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission will now come to order. It will be the process this evening to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and/or their representative, then open the public hearing and hear from those in favor and/or in opposition of the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. Before closing the public hearing, both staff, the applicant, and/or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond and provide additional information and answer questions. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed, and we will hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. I'll also make a note this evening, I think there was a sign-in sheet, and has everyone that wishes to speak tonight been able to sign in? Okay, thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda, we will need to table this first item, is that correct?
No, it'll be renoticed as a new meeting.
Okay.
So just no action taken.
Okay, so the first item listed on the agenda for 2A, and that is a preliminary plat, it's going to be re-agended. So we will go on to the second item, which is item 2B, to receive public comment regarding a request for a specific use permit, SUP 24-04, and we shall hear from staff.
Yes, ma'am. So today we're going to hear a specific use permit, SUP 2404, for religious institutions in RSS and RT zoning at 1307 North Husband Street. Here's an area map which shows the frontage on both Husband and Main Streets. Here's the aerial view where you can see the high school to the west and the residential surrounding the property, which you can see. We'll get to that. So here's the street view from Husband with the existing residential structure, which we'll talk about tonight. And here's the view from Main Street with the residential accessory structure that was built. Here's the zoning on the property. You can see to the west is zoned P for public, which is the high school. To the north and south of the west side of the property, you have RSS, which is small lot single family residential. And the eastern half of the property, you have RT zoning, north and south. The future land use map designates that this property will stay low density residential with, again, public to the west for the high school and some commercial down on Boomer. So here's the churches and other religious institutions, which is what we're talking about today, is the establishment engaged in providing church and religious services and activities. In both RSS and RT, churches and other religious institutions is a use that is allowed with a specific use permit. What that means is just some basics on zoning is in your zoning ordinance for every zoning district, for example, RSS, you have those uses that are allowed by right. So in single family residential, you can build a house. You'd be allowed to do that. You wouldn't have to come before a planning commission or city council. You have those uses that aren't allowed in any scenario. So for example, you can't put a meat packing plant in RSS zoning. That wouldn't be allowed. But then you have those uses that are kind of in that gray area, which are allowed with a specific use permit. What that means is in some instances, a church could go in RSS zoning and that would be appropriate. In some instances, it would not. That gray area with that subjectivity is what triggers the specific use permit, which is why we're before the Planning Commission today. So here's just a couple paragraphs from the zoning ordinance, which are going to be hard to read, and don't worry, I won't read all of them. But basically, the first paragraph says that conditions can be added to the specific use permit. You don't just have to recommend approval or denial. You can add considerations or conditions on the approval, basically for those extra requirements if you see that extra requirements would make it an appropriate use on the site. And the second paragraph, which I will read, the effect of the proposed specific use permit upon the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, public utilities, drainage, and other matters related to the general welfare may also be considered. So these are the things that the code recommend be taken into consideration, among other things, of course. So here's the site plan that was submitted to staff for the specific use permit. Those orange boxes are the setbacks. So right here you see the existing home, which is a residential dwelling. You have these setbacks, which are the distance from the property to the property line. You have this existing driveway, and you have these. So the red line is the property line surrounding the property. The yellow line right here is a utility easement. The blue line here, also utility easement. And this is that residential accessory structure that we spoke of. I do want to point out one thing while we have the picture in front of us, which is this 5-foot setback to the south of the property. When the structure was built, it was built as a residential accessory structure. That does allow for a 5-foot setback. So this was built as permitted. But in the same code, since this is an RT zoning, all other uses besides residential have to have a 15-foot side setback. So that means if church or other religious institutions were happening inside this building, it would be required to have a 15-foot side setback. So we'll talk more about that later, but while we have the visual, I wanted to point that out. The applicant was going to be present, but I don't see him here. But if you have any questions for staff, definitely let me know.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
The 5 foot, you said you were going to talk about that at some point. It seems like it was approved. I mean, that came before the permitting and got approved for 5 foot.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
It was
you talk
approved.
about that some more, 'cause that's
Do you want
confusing.
me to clarify that, Henry? Because I know you weren't here during that time period.
Of course.
So the permit application the city received was for accessory structure to a residential house. It wasn't permitted for commercial or other uses. It's in compliance with the way it was permitted. Now that's not going to be used as accessory structure such as a garage. It will now require a 15-foot setback if it's approved to be used as a religious institution. Does that clarify?
Well, yeah, it clarifies, thank you.
So I have
don't know how you
a
could move the building 10
follow-up
feet.
question then. In order for it to be compliant, that would take an approval by, that they have to be granted a variance by Board of Adjustment?
Correct. Staff will get to that, and they're at their ending that their recommendation, I believe, is going to include that condition that a variance is granted by the BOA.
But yes, ma'am, Chair, that would be correct. That would be what would be required to bring churches and other religious institutions were allowed on the property, that would be what would be required to bring that building specifically into compliance.
Thanks.
Of course.
I have some other questions about what would be required if this were to be approved. What parking would be required?
So the parking for churches and other religious institutions is 1 per 300 square foot, I do believe. I have that in my notes, so I'll confirm that. But basically, we did the math, and only on the accessory structure, we'd be required, I believe, 42 spaces.
So it would be only on the accessory structure, but if religious functions were happening in the house, would that square footage also require?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it would be the total built square footage as to what's there.
Yes, ma'am.
And if I also understand in looking at the report, the current residential structure doesn't necessarily meet what would be required for a religious building commercial structure. Is that accurate?
I don't know what standards the home was built to, but I can say it was permitted as a residential structure. So it wasn't held to those standards during the inspection process. Could have been built to those standards, but that's not how it was inspected.
That's unknown at this point, but
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
And I was able to confirm it's 1 per 60 square foot for churches and other religious institutions. So to correct myself on the parking.
And would that need to be impervious parking?
Yes, ma'am.
So then I think we would, a question I would have, and you may not be prepared to answer this at this moment, but maybe we can kind of figure out a rough idea. If we could figure out an idea of how many parking spaces that would be and kind of how much of the lot we're talking about.
I believe it was estimated when we were speaking with the applicant around 40 parking spaces,
Okay,
but that's not set in stone until we get an application from them. So
Okay.
once,
kind of a ballpark.
if this SUP is approved and a variance is granted, then the applicant will apply for the proper building codes and the application. Once our building official receives that, then all that will be determined and be required to be in compliance with our land development code, fire code. All of those requirements would be.
That does help.
Yeah, and sorry, I was just going to clarify a point you made earlier on the existing residential structure. We would only require the parking for the parts of the building that are being used for churches and other religious institutions. So for example, in the last meeting, it was mentioned that the second story could be used for residences while the first story is used for the religious institutions, which means we would only have to calculate the parking based on that
Areas.
first square.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was being too loud.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, and then if you could remind me again, what is the acreage that this sits on? Do we know the acreage? Because I know there's a point at which we're going to be looking at, do we have runoff that needs to be calculated? And are we looking at then, if we're doing impervious area, then are we looking at having to retain water or detain water coming off?
Yes, ma'am. So I don't know the acreage off the top of my head. I can definitely get you that answer. But I can say that a full drainage study would be required for the site.
Okay.
All the normal building
All the normal building.
application will be
Gotcha.
processed through if this was approved.
Okay.
This is like just our first step in the process.
Okay, all right. I just want to understand the
Yeah.
impact of
But they definitely will
what would be,
be required to follow the rest of the remaining codes.
okay,
I know that was a concern last time.
right, okay. I think that's all my questions for now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this point, we would ask if the applicant is here to, if you'd like to come up and say a few words.
Matthew Clark of 5325 West Trenton Court, property owner of 1307 North Husband Street. I think the only things that we would say at this point is, as mentioned, the special use permit is being considered and reviewed for the entirety of the property. We have an existing residential structure that is being used as a primary residence for someone that is living there today. We do expect that that would continue to be used as a primary residence, with small portions of that used periodically for small group settings. In terms of anything that were to be considered in assembly, the existing building that was built in the back as a residential accessory unit is what is being considered for additional considerations from a permitting perspective. This is just the beginning of what we would work through in terms of ensuring that we were meeting all city or county or any regulatory requirement and code. So we do expect that if this does continue to move forward, where the SUP is approved with some sort of conditions related to that property and or that building, that we would then begin the process of working through the Board of Adjustments for anything that we were able to be, that would be approved related to the code requirements, such as parking and or other things that were non-ADA that we knew would not be a part of any Board of Adjustment requests that we would have. And so our intention at this point is, again, we're with the anticipation that we can seek this up for the property in its entirety with the condition on that residential accessory dwelling needing potential commercial building code requirements, that at that point we would then continue to move forward with those things to make sure that we met all of those requirements.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Yep.
So at this time, I would open the public hearing, and everyone who has signed up is in opposition, and I don't know if we've had any latecomers that did not get a chance to sign up to speak. Seeing none, okay. I'm going to call the names off of here in the order that they're on here, and we do have a 5-minute time limit per person to speak. So the first person's name that I have is Barbara Miller. And if you'd give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Barbara Miller. I live at 101 Randolph Court, which is a sort of catty corner across the street from this structure. Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
I would like to speak to several facts that had come out in the previous hearing that had not been rectified by Mr. Clark. And there are a lot of rules that have been broken. When we talked about parking, he said to us, the neighbors, well, we talked to the high school and they're going to let us use their parking lots. But nothing was in writing. We didn't have any final approval of this, and it's not on his property if it's going to be used for the use he has intentioned. It also came out that the previous K-Life building he had, which was smaller than this building, had up to 40 students or 40 inhabitants at a time for these get-togethers, which implies that he would have more than this. He also said that it would be mostly indoors and it would be very quiet, and yet he doesn't have heating or air conditioning, so that would imply that at certain times of year, people are going to have to be outside. And after, we were told that they weren't allowed to do any more building or anything until this was decided, but after that meeting, they put up parts of structures on the outside, so they continued to do things to that part of the building. He invited the neighbors over to the house, and at the time, he told us that, well, if he couldn't get this, it would be a duplex. And if it was a duplex, but it wasn't going to be a two-family house, it was going to be larger, so it would have up to 8 people or something at a time living there, maybe single students, et cetera. This is what he said to us. And then he asked us if we could hold a K-Life meeting there so we could see how quiet it would be. So we contacted the city, and we were told that he is not allowed to contact anybody in the neighborhood, but this was going on. He also had a website with K-Life Stillwater on it that showed all kinds of meetings that were going to be held in that building, whether it was the house or whether it was the new structure. So a lot of this is illegal, and of course he's let the place go, and there's 3 feet of weeds all over the yard, which is another issue. But nothing that he has said has seems to be the truth. I mean, or at least he's telling us one thing and he's telling you something else. So I just feel that this is a great problem, and I would like to add for the quietness, my son lives in Prairie Village, Kansas, my other son, and they put a K-Life building up, and he said the noise was awful, and he lived several blocks away, and you could hear everything that took place in there. So I just wanted to pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the next name I have is Elaine Ackerson.
Hello, my name is Elaine Ackerson. I live at 113 Randolph Court, so I am down the street from this facility. I have a couple of comments. I am concerned that the activities that are planned by K-Life are not consistent with residential area. The character of the neighborhood will be damaged by this particular facility being used in the way that Mr. Clark and K-Life would like to see it used. I understand that as a homeowner, I may have occasional gatherings at my house. I could have parties or whatever gatherings on an occasional basis. But K-Life is having multiple gatherings over a many weeks throughout the year. And this is then inconsistent with the use of the other properties in the neighborhood. It's a weekly, monthly basis, up to 40 or more people, and I know that one of the goals for K-Life and the board of K-Life is to expand this beyond just K-Life, so hopefully invite others to use the property in different ways also, which again is not within the character of a residential neighborhood. Secondly, I am concerned that as a religious entity, I understand that K-Life is exempt from noise ordinances. We as neighbors have been told that if we find activities on this site to be noisy or intrusive, we can contact the police department and file a complaint. That honestly places a burden on us to monitor, contact the police, request that a formal complaint be filed, and then follow up through that process. It also places a burden on our law enforcement officers, which they have other things they can do other than respond to neighborhood complaints. What options do we have as neighbors if the SUP is approved that will allow us to enjoy the peace and quiet of our neighborhood and does not place an undue burden on us? It is not appropriate for the neighborhood, again, looking at the character of the neighborhood and the use proposed by K-Life. The new accessory building, which has been described as a barn or a shed, will not be used as a barn or a shed to store, for example, equipment, a boat, lawn equipment, those kinds of things, as one might expect when you see the description of an accessory unit. Rather, it will be used as a gathering place, an assembly place for children and adults to meet and have activities. This building appears to have more of a commercial use or perhaps an assembly requirement use, and safety of the children and adults who use this structure should be a priority with appropriate requirements. Lastly, although Mr. Clark promises to be a good neighbor, he has proven not to be, based on direct observations from neighbors about the multiple gatherings that have been held over the past few months. And in addition, as has been noted, the property along North Main Street has not been mowed or maintained. It's covered with high weeds and grasses, hardly the actions of what I would call a good neighbor. And I respectfully request that the SUP be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. The next name I have on the list is Tom Hennessy.
Will I be permitted to show an image on flash drive?
Oh, I don't know if we have.
We can't accept external
flash
flash drives unless we run it through our system. Do you have hard copies of anything that you would like to, we can pass around?
If you'll give them to our clerk. Perfect, thank you. And if you can just go ahead and state your name and address for the record in the microphone.
Tom Hennessy, 124 East Redbud Drive.
Okay, we've got them.
Be happy to share one with Mr. Clark if he wants to see what I'm presenting.
Oh, okay, there's
I think there's an extra copy.
an extra copy if you want to pass them back down.
Mr. Clark, would you like a copy? He's asking.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to present briefly. In the interest of time, I'm not going to rehash the comments that have been previously made, except to say that I am in agreement with them. What I presented to you in hard copy is a photo made a few days ago of the property. A couple of points that I think are relevant here. One would be to address the, quote, neighborliness of what's going on here. This shows the photo from the east side of the property. If you would turn around, which you, were you on site, you would look down Randolph Court to homes that are very nice homes. So this is a very nice residential neighborhood in which this appears. Clearly, this is, for whatever reason, not being kept up. And it is not in conformity with the appearance of the houses and the lawns and the other part of the adjacent to this property. So my question is very brief. If this sort of thing is approved, will there be some directive to be in compliance with a city landscaping ordinance, or some directive to do something to soften the exterior appearance of the building?
We will ask staff that question when we get to that point in the meeting proceedings. Do you have other questions?
No, I presume that there are city staff that are knowledgeable about the kinds of plant material that would meet the objectives that we would like to see happen here. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next on the list, it is Clark. Is it Ron and Linda? Did I get that right?
I'm Ron Clark. We live directly across Main Street. from that blue building that you just saw the picture of. And, you know, I walk out the door every day, and that's one of the first things that I see is that big blue building on that street. I'm not sure why it's not being maintained right now, the yard. The weeds are yay high, growing all around the building. Maybe there's a reason why he's not taking care of that, but he is not taking care of it. And the other comment I would make is, you know, my son, first time he saw that building, he said, "Dad, do you realize that's going to have a negative effect on your ability to sell your house and a negative effect on the value of your house?" I said, "You're right." So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Clark, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Okay. All right. The next name I have on the list is Renee Rule.
My name is Renee Rule, and I live at 1315 North Husband, which is directly next door and north of 1307 North Husband. I'm here to dispute granting a specific use permit to this organization at this address in this neighborhood. My objection has two main points. Number one, having this organization right in the middle of our block does not preserve the integrity of our neighborhood. And number two, this particular group has been disrespectful by disregarding the zoning process and holding events without the SUP. I will begin with the integrity of our neighborhood. The property at 1307 North Husband is located in the middle of our block, surrounded by single and multifamily houses, meaning families of all kinds are making this neighborhood their homes. The key word here being homes. Granting the SUP would disrupt the family character, aesthetics, and charm of our neighborhood. At the December 17th meeting, Mr. Stockton, who spoke on behalf of K-Life, said, and I quote, "We, meaning K-Life, are in an area that is highly trafficked and heavily noise-related anyway," unquote. His statement just proves how little K-Life knows about our neighborhood. If you actually lived in our neighborhood, you would know how quiet it is. There's high traffic during the school year, Monday through Friday, but only before school, during lunch, and after school. The rest of the time is relatively quiet. And all of the activity is contained to the school property across the street. The east side of Husband is all family homes, which makes our side of the street quiet until K-Life moved in, which brings me to my second point. I was informed by the city planner's office that K-Life was not allowed to conduct any K-Life activities at this property unless an SUP was granted. I live next door and have witnessed ongoing K-Life activities since September 2024. Some proof can be found on their social media, which lists events and activities at 1307 North Husband. I have contacted Mr. Biebelheimer and passed along documentation, including photographs of K-Life activities taking place next door, as well as a log of multiple activities per week happening there. The largest event was held on Sunday, May 4th from 4 to 6 p.m. It consisted of about 30 kids and adults playing baseball, cornhole, and loud music in the front yard. It was very loud. My husband and I were doing yard work, as it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and the activity was so loud and disruptive right on our property line. Most concerning to us was that at the December 17th meeting, they stated that there would be K-Life events with about 30 students happening 3 times a week. Tuesdays after school for 1.5 hours, and Monday and Thursday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. So the noise and disruption that we witnessed on May 4th would be occurring at least 3 times a week. which would impact our neighborhood in a very negative way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next name I have on the list is Dawn Rule.
My name is Don Rule. I live at 1315 North Husband. We are just north of the property at 1307. We share a 207-foot property line with the K-Life facility. And so compared to most of the neighbors, we have a slightly different experience in that our house is situated a little weird. Our front door does not go towards Husband. It actually goes towards K-Life. And so it's not that I'm stalking K-Life or checking them out, but as I walk out my front door, K-Life is in front of me. And so we see a lot of this happen on a weekly basis, multiple times per week. Usually it's early in the morning, or it's at night, or it's on the weekends. And so it's difficult for the city code enforcement to catch that because they're not there typically during city hours because the kids are at school. And so because our house does face K-Life, we see a lot of that stuff, and so it just gets documented in our heads, the things that are happening. We saw things like cars lined up right on the property line in the grass for football games at the high school. So they line up there and park in the grass and face our house when they park. They went on a weekend getaway where I think a lot of the students met at 1307, parked their cars in the grass, and so all the cars were all parked there all weekend long. We have my wife Renee just talked about the event that happened a few weeks ago where the party was happening. This is very intrusive for us, and the concern or the point I want to make is that for a specific use permit, according to 23-180B, it says that that the SUP should integrate well into the surrounding community. I don't think that the proposed SUP and the actions K-Life intends to take and have taken up to this point integrate well into our community. Approval of an SUP should seek to enhance the surrounding community, and I don't think that they are enhancing our community in any way. And so therefore, I encourage you to vote against this application and against this SUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's everybody that I had on the list. Okay. At this point, we would have an opportunity to have the applicant address any of the questions that have been raised.
Again, Matthew Clark of 5325 West Trenton Court, property owner of 1307 North Husband. There's a number of things I could address. I think I'm going to leave some things for a lot of things that are mentioned are definitely by code, right? So the fact that the building exists is built to code. I can't change the color of the building, at least at this point. There is no landscaping ordinances. There's no HOAs. There's nothing that would sort of supersede what we should or could do from a code enforcement. So some of the things I'm just going to sort of leave, and if that comes about, then we certainly would address those things. What I will address is just a few of the comments. I think first, I find it relatively ironic that almost every single person came up here and spoke about the view or the look of the property. I'll remind everybody that when we bought this property, it had been abandoned for years. It had squatters living in the home, and it had homeless shelters erected in the trees that every single one of these people has since stated that they didn't know, and so therefore out of sight became out of mind. As a matter of fact, the first time that we walked the property to view whether we were going to purchase, we walked in on a homeless person living inside of the property. And so for me, I just find it very ironic that is now something that everybody is going to want to speak to. From a noise perspective, the prior K-Life building, while everyone says it, yes, was in a commercially zoned property, it was right within a neighborhood. We were right across the street from multiple homes in a neighborhood for a number of years, never having any issues related to noise or other things that those neighbors would want to speak to or had issues with. I think in addition to noise, since owning the property for almost a year now, there's a number of other things that we've noticed that we struggle with as property owners. One, every summer, we can hear the Stillwater High School band early in the mornings playing at the football stadium. When there's a home baseball or softball game, we can hear a number of noise issues related to OSU's use within the proximity of our property. But all of those are things that are community. All of those are things that tell me it is a vibrant, it's a vibrant community. What it tells me is the noise that would be created from the use of this type of engagement with young kids is exactly the type of area that the high school, the college, and everything is looking to accomplish. When I think about the purpose of a SUP is this, right? It's finding areas of a community that are underserved and finding an optimal place for them to be served. Stillwater K-Life is no different than any other nonprofit in the community. We are seeking and searching for locations to hold an opportunity to connect with young kids. I have asked and scoured this town for a place that we can do this at a cost, at a fiscally responsible level, and there is none. We've asked to buy multiple commercial properties. We've asked to find any sort of place that we could connect with these kids in a way that this property can, and they just don't exist. And so I think from a K-Life perspective, from a property owner perspective, we have every intention to follow every code that may be put into effect. We have zero intention to have a property that is not maintained. But over the last few months, as we've been seeking what is the best path to move forward, there have certainly been aspects of this where we've been waiting on what the direction God was going to take your ultimate recommendation. And so as a result, again, as we mentioned in the beginning, depending on your decision, whether to recommend for or against approval to City Council, it is with every bit of our intention to make sure that this property meets every commercial, every code, every association, every ordinance. It is our intention to have a place where kids can connect. In regards to what they're talking about with existing events that have been ongoing so far, 3 times a week before school, there's been 12 to 15 kids on average that have a Bible study in the morning. I can't speak to if that was happening in my neighborhood and there was noise because there was 12 cars pulling in and out of a neighborhood right across the street from me. I cannot imagine that would be something that would impact my day in a negative way. I recognize that noise is hard and change is hard, but if there was 30 kids playing in a property right in my backyard on an occasion such as an end-of-year party that was held, I cannot imagine what a more joyful noise would be happening. I think for me, a lot of the issues and challenges that the neighbors bring up are really issues of change. They're not issues of law or rule or fact, because as the building sits today, we've done everything we can to make sure that we are following every required code and ordinance that can be enforced, and we would plan to do no different as this SUP continues through the approval process. I recognize that these decisions are hard, but we certainly hope that you'll consider the full history of our ownership, the process and the detail that we have gone through to make sure that we are going through and diligent in every process. And we'd ask nothing more than to continue this through to City Council and the chance to make sure that this property functions as any sort of condition may be set. And it would be our intention to make sure all those are met.
So, Mr. Clark, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
As has been mentioned, and we have the photograph that was passed out tonight, and we had some other photographs that were sent by, and I drove by today and looked at the site, and this is how it appears today. Can you speak to the tall weeds? Why it hasn't been mowed?
Yeah, I mean, we're just in a season of, the weather has sort of presented some challenges related to that area, right? But at this point, there's really nothing more than we've been spending time doing other things this season of life with our kids. And as a result, it has not been top of priority.
So your priority hasn't been to maintain the mowing on the property?
No, it has not been to maintain this small section here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Are the weeds property wide, even off of Husband Street? Are there high weeds?
No, there's been some sections that we've maintained on that side. This section here is a little more challenging given the slope, and there's a lot of mud that sits in behind this. And so, just again, being able to get the right equipment over to this side of Redbud is more challenging than some of the other areas of the property.
So it's the east side along Main Street?
Just this is the east side along Main and Redbud. That's the view that you're looking at here, correct?
And to clarify, the city did receive a complaint yesterday. Code enforcement was able to go, I believe, today, and a notice was noticed on the door for 7-day fix.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And then I guess the other thing I would ask you, because it's been raised, and I want to give you an opportunity to comment on this. Several times it's been mentioned that the understanding from last December was that there would be no functions held. Was that your understanding?
No, it was not my understanding that, it was my understanding that anything that would be considered an assembly, which there's a number of attendees or sort of a type of event that would meet the assembly threshold. Those are things that we started to work with community development on to try to understand exactly what an assembly would then be. So as I mentioned, the only events that were maintained after the last SUP meeting are the same events that were held before the SUP meeting. And so no new regularly scheduled events were happening since we last had our meeting. That would then be considered, again, assembly size.
And what did you understand to be assembly size?
We have not yet been told nor found anything in writing that Stillwater has in sort of a number.
Okay. All right.
But I will say, we do know that based on the square footage of the building, 199 is the maximum threshold, which the size of that building would require and meet an assembly size. So we do know that the use of that building would meet that assembly, but no one has told us, again, if we have more than 25 people on the property or 40 people on the property, then that then would constitute the actual assembly at that point.
So I don't know that assembly is necessarily defined by a number of people. I believe it's defined by what is occurring, the type of activity. So you're gathering individuals for religious purposes, correct?
Yeah, as I mentioned, again, the activities that took place after the December meeting were the exact same as the activities that took place before. Mm-hmm.
So religious activities.
Yeah, I mean, a Bible study is certainly going to be a religious activity, yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got a question. Is there any parking available on North Husband on either side of the street?
I do not believe Husband offers on-street parking. We do have you mean for on the street itself?
On the street
itself.
Yeah,
I do not believe. And obviously so Husband or Main Street? Husband. No, I do not believe.
Right
Husband
across from the
does.
high school.
Yeah, Main Street does not have either. There's a section on the east side that has restricted access and parking on that side. Obviously, a key consideration for everything for us would be a Board of Adjustment review to, given the proximity of the high school's parking lot, the ability to use the high school parking after hours, which is a common thing. And so again, there's a number of things that we would need to take to the Board of Adjustments as a part of a condition on being able to use the building or the property for those types of activities, and the volume of parking that would be required and or the type of hardscape that would be required for that type of parking.
And is there a sidewalk on the east side of Husband Street?
I'm not familiar with a sidewalk on the east side of Husband Street, just on the Main Street side. There is some sidewalk, I believe, but I do not believe it's on our side of Main Street. So there's no sidewalks are on either side of our property lines.
Yeah, there is a sidewalk on the west side of Husband Street by the high school.
Right,
But
and I believe there's
a sidewalk
some on
east
the
side.
Redbud side. I just don't believe it's on our side. Yep.
There is no sidewalk.
Oh, okay.
Correct. There's no sidewalk on it's
North
on
Main.
not on North Main. It's on
Just the husband
along
side.
Husband.
Yep. Okay.
Other questions? I don't think we have any other questions at this time for you.
Thanks.
I do have a couple questions for staff. Could staff comment on the question that was raised on any landscape requirements should the SUP be granted? What landscape requirements would there be?
Yes, ma'am. So this would be held to the commercial landscaping requirement. So when they would submit a building permit for basically a remodel to build the site up to commercial standards, we would hold them to all landscaping requirements in the code.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hennessy? I said, does that answer your question, Mr. Hennessy? So the comment, yeah, the answer to your question was, if the SUP is granted, then the property would have to meet all commercial standards, and we do have a commercial landscape code it would have to meet.
Would that also include screening, I assume, for the building on the north and south side, probably east as well?
Yes, sir. So the screening section of our code is written based on zoning. So since the zoning on the two properties would continue to be residential, we actually wouldn't require a buffering fence as would normally be done between commercial and residential. And that's just because it's based on zoning instead of use.
Correct, but it can be a condition if you so see that fit.
As well as additional landscaping if you think that would be beneficial to the site, or if you think it would make it an appropriate use. Also, to answer a question that was asked earlier, the site is 1.8 acres. And the photos and email that were mentioned by one of the public commenters was attached in the agenda for your reference.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for staff? Did we answer everything?
I'm slightly confused, sorry. I'm just quick clarification.
Go ahead, it's good.
So the screening is based off of zoning, but the setback of 5 feet versus 15 feet is based off of use?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for clarification.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so next up we have staff findings.
I'll have to close the public hearing first, and then I will ask for staff to present findings. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll
Go
sit
ahead.
down.
Yeah. Oh, no, you can present the findings. Oh.
That's in favor.
Oh, okay.
We don't close it yet.
Okay, so council says I need to make sure and ask if there's anyone who wants to speak in favor. There was no one signed up that wanted to speak in favor, so I do need to make sure and just clarify if anyone was in favor of this other than the applicant that wanted to come to speak. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you. We're getting all our I's dotted and T's crossed. That's why we have her here.
Yes, ma'am. So on to staff findings. The Land Development Code allows for church and other religious institutions in the small lot, single-family residential, and two-family zoning district with a specific use permit. The comprehensive plan on this property calls for low-density residential uses. The accessory structure was permitted and inspected as a residential accessory structure or a metal barn as it was called out on the application. If the specific use permit is approved, it will change the applicable building and fire code requirements for all structures. If the specific use permit were to be approved, all applicable site design requirements from the Land Development Code, like parking and drainage requirements, will need to be met. And lastly, changing the use will make the accessory structure non-conforming with the existing side yard setback to the south. That's in reference to the 5 versus 15 yard setback that we discussed on the residential accessory structure. So alternatives that you could do tonight: first off, you could accept the findings and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed specific use permit. You could also accept the findings and recommend that the City Council conditionally approve the proposed specific use permit subject to conditions being met, which can include but are not limited to a variance from the 15-foot side yard setback requirement being granted by the Board of Adjustment to allow for the existing accessory structure to be conforming. Option number 3 would be find that the specific use permit is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impacts to the surrounding vicinity and do not recommend that the City Council approve the request. And lastly, find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date. Staff's recommendation is that if the planning commission does recommend to the city council approval of the specific use permit as presented, staff recommends conditional approval as stated in alternative number 2 above. Additional conditions could also be added. That was just our recommendation to include at least the one. Any questions you have?
I don't think we have any at this time.
Thank you.
Any thoughts? Well, I have a few notes here that I took while we were listening to some comments from the neighbors. And I think some of the things that stood out to me is there was a very consistent comment about whether or not this use fits in the neighborhood. It does not seem to be much of a fit to me. We've had an opportunity by activities continuing to occur to really kind of get a trial run of what this would be, it seems. In my assessment, having been a Stillwater resident for almost 5 decades, pretty familiar with the area. It is a quiet neighborhood. There is kind of that rhythm of the school that comes and goes. But having more activity there, and I think in particular for me, it's the frequency and the increased density. The parking requirements that would be required would begin to really change the character of this, as well as the activities. So by the time that this SUP would have to meet commercial requirements, it's really going to become almost like a spot zoning, right? It's going to be one little piece of property in the middle of a very consistent neighborhood, and feel very commercial in my opinion. There's a lot that would have to be done there. I think other than that, one of the things that the applicant did say, and when we looked at this almost 6 months ago, I thought it was a positive that the applicant had purchased the property and really kind of cleaned it up and done those sorts of things. And to that point, there were actually some of the neighborhoods that came and were positive about it. I think since then, the condition it's in now, the continued work that's been going on, gives me pause and makes me wonder really what kind of neighbor this individual would be. Not that it has bearing on the use of the property, but it kind of gives weight to what would happen to the character of the neighborhood. And that's why I mentioned that. I feel like there's a lot of things that would affect the character of the neighborhood if this SUP were to be approved.
I feel like as we look at the alternatives, that it's really between 2 and 3 on the list. With the staff recommending 2, I would be probably leaning toward that, but with some additional caveats. I mean, to do what we could to try and at least mitigate or reduce the concerns of the neighborhood, which, there's consistency there, and that probably leads to validity. So I don't know what those would be. I don't know if there's like a, fast-growing poplar trees or something like that that you could put on the east side that would shield the view and maybe knock down some of the sound. And then for the Rule family to the north, something similar. So that's kind of where I land, is between 2 and 3. Either is not a specific use that's appropriate, or there's a lot of caveats to make it one.
I think that does bring up another question I would have for staff. There was the comment made earlier that a religious institution is not bound by noise ordinance. Is that true?
That is correct. They're exempt from the noise ordinance.
Okay.
Can that be a caveat that
Let me double check. I believe it can, but let me double check, okay? While you guys discuss.
All right.
I believe so. Under F of this section of the specific use permit ordinance, it says that you can make conditions, including development standards and operational conditions and other safeguards. That's important to keep the welfare and protection of the adjacent properties.
then it's just up to neighbors to report that to code enforcement and
Yes,
police?
and I noticed earlier that a citizen concerned that we're closed when activities are happening, but they can call the non-emergency line in the evenings and on the weekends.
Has the city been notified or aware of the continued use of the property since our December meeting?
We were just notified, let's see what date this is. I believe May 8th, am I correct? Henry, I think you received it. It looks like this email might have been around May 8th, which is where those pictures are on the back of the packet. I believe it was around May 8th. That staff received this. We have forwarded it to code enforcement. They just started looking into it, and today they went out and, like I said, marked it for the tall grass and weeds. It was okay.
So
But I will
was that
also
for
say-
the tall grass and weeds, or was that for the use of the property without a specific use permit?
Well, the complaints came in as, one, the continued use, that's not permitted right now, and two, the cars parked in the grass. Unfortunately, my understanding is that's not a violation of our code. And then the tall grass. If there is an activity happening that's not permitted, they need to call the non-emergency line for the police department to respond to, so we can document that. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard when we don't get notice for weeks or months after the event's already happened.
Right.
Right now, the use for the property is RSS zoning and RT zoning, which is single family and, I believe, 2-family, which would not be allowed for the assembly or large groups of activities. That's not what those zonings are.
So let me understand this. So right now, I'm not supposed to have any Bible studies?
Right, they're not supposed to use this property other than for single family and 2-family zoning. That is what is allowed there. It's not allowed for large gatherings on a regular basis and large activities.
If I was a family, could I have a Bible study?
On a regular basis, and you are having a large gatherings, that would not be allowed.
How large is a large gathering? And
It's
that was
gonna be a
one of the
case by-
questions was, how big is an assembly?
Well, it's not the question of the assembly. The question is, are they using this as single family and 2-family? And they're not right now, according to the citizens and I believe also the applicant. And that's the concern. If an SUP was approved, they could hold all these activities.
So I think for me, part of the rub I have on this is there's social media advertisements that have been included in this packet for activities to occur. That, to me, that would be very different than me being in my Sunday school class or texting a group of friends saying, hey, I'd like to host a Bible study, come over. It's kind of like, hey, come over for dinner, right?
When
It'd
you
be a
use the
little different.
property for other uses than the RSS and RT on a regular basis, that becomes the issue. And that would be, right now, that is a violation of our code to use this property multiple days a week for these gatherings.
I'm just trying to help with some guidance going forward so
Sure.
that everyone understands the same criteria for what uses are approved and not, so that no one's in violation. So, because apparently there's been some confusion about that.
Well, I would move that the specific use permit is not an appropriate use for the property based on impacts to surrounding vicinity that would include the compatible use, the density, the additional parking, the noise that seems to be something that happens consistently, as well as the parking that happens consistently, changing really the character of the neighborhood. And I would not recommend that the City Council approve the request.
It's tough for me to look at this and not appreciate K-Life. But you have to look at it in a sense of, regardless of the organization and what K-Life represents, does it fit? And I tend to agree with your comments, and I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to find the specific use permit as not an appropriate use for the property. We shall now vote. Motion passes 2 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't get to look. Sorry.
Okay, so we had
That was correct.
two pass, 2 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
2 yes,
2 yes,
1 no,
1 no,
1 abstain.
1 abstain.
Motion passes.
All right, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the meeting summary for review and possible action, and we have the regular meeting summary of April 15th. I did have one typo on one of the back pages. Let's see if I can find it really quick.
Oh, so apologies, this item is actually an old draft that was included in the agenda.
Do we need to table this for the next meeting?
I would say a no motion on the
Okay.
item as.
That's fine. No action.
No action? Okay, so no action will be taken on item 3A, and we will review that at a later date. Okay. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items from staff, the planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. The only thing we have listed is that the next regular meeting is June 3rd. You have anything else from staff? Okay. All right, very good. The last item is adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 4-0. We now stand adjourned.